Everyone loves George Bailey. He always stood up to the evil Mr. Potter, even when he was just a kid. He turned Mr. Martini into a homeowner and gave his brother Harry the opportunity to leave Bedford Falls. His wife Mary wanted to marry him the moment he promised her the moon. Everyone loves George Bailey except George Bailey. His dreams were big, but life moved way too fast. This is It's a Wonderful Life.
I don't know why I felt like clapping.
Yeah.
There's just a weird little urge.
That was written a year ago.
That's what you wrote a year? That's exactly what you wrote, word for word?
Yeah. Okay, well, by the way, I'm wearing a ridiculous costume. Go watch us on YouTube if you want to see what the costume looks like. I'm not going to reveal it. Yeah, I wrote this a year ago when we were planning to do this podcast on It's a Wonderful Life. It got canceled because we got in a little tiff, which we can maybe talk about a little bit later.
I don't remember it, so you're going to have to share that with me.
But this morning when I was looking through my notes, I searched on Google Docs, It's a Wonderful Life, and I found the old document to it, and I found the synopsis, and I just adjusted a sentence, but I wanted to keep it because it feels like such a sincere synopsis that I wouldn't write now. This feels so serious and very I'm going through the plot.
Yeah.
And now it's become I'm quoting Man or a Muppet. I feel like
it's kind of bringing you back a little bit, you know?
Yeah. And this is a very sincere movie, so I thought it would only be right.
Yeah. So this is a movie that I think, at least from what I've seen, some of our podcast listeners have been wanting for a little bit. Especially, I remember last year when we were going to record it, people were looking forward to it, and it was kind of a bummer to cancel it.
Yeah, and I think when we asked for people to write in for this episode of how it changed them, which we'll read those write-ins later in the episode, and I didn't realize how much our reaction to that movie on the Nice Dude Movie Night channel meant to people. Not only does the movie mean a lot to our fans, but also our reaction to the movie meant a lot to them too.
Yeah, 100%. It's not our most viewed episode by any means, but it is probably our most appreciated. That one's been referenced to us, and whenever fans message us on Patreon or leave anything, they say hey, I love your videos, and It's a Wonderful Life is my favorite by far.
Yeah, and
it's interesting.
The comments are paragraphs, and we're not saying this to toot our own horn. We're just kind of expressing our own surprise at how much a video that we made on it impacted people.
Well, yeah, I think it speaks volumes on the movie in itself too, because I think this movie is very it hits you somewhere in your soul. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people watching it who watched our reaction felt that along with us a little bit. Even I have personal friends. I said, I watched your It's a Wonderful Life reaction and cried with you guys.
Yeah, I think you and I are both very open-hearted. And if you watch...
Speak for yourself, dude.
I'm
closed off, dude.
I'm fucking sorry.
I'm a complicated guy.
Yeah. There's so many layers. Let me peel you back.
Let me peel back those... Chris, you're an onion, dude. Move over, Shrek.
Yeah. But I don't even know what I was going to say.
I'm sorry, man.
Oh, no. We're very open-hearted people, and I feel our It's a Wonderful Life reaction really showcased that. Because I think it was the first time I genuinely cried.
Yeah.
Because I've kind of gotten teary-eyed through a very heartfelt moment in other movies, and maybe through our videos as well. But never on camera have I cried that hard as I did during those last 20 minutes. Oh my god! Fuck! Oh, yeah!
Yeah, which, I mean, people have done compilation videos recently of people's reactions to the ending of It's a Wonderful Life.
I watch a lot of people's reactions to It's a Wonderful Life, and specifically that ending.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure a lot of people who look up reactions to it find specifically or skip to the ending,
So let me introduce the show, and then I have a question right off the bat to ask you. But welcome to Movies That Changed Us. I'm Altaf.
And I'm Chris.
And today we're going to explore how It's a Wonderful Life changed us. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, then you can watch us on YouTube at Movies That Changed Us. I got it.
I was going to say, I saw your eyes gradually light up as you were delivering that. You're dude, I'm doing it. Look at me.
That'd be me if I was an actor and I'm getting a good take in. What if I smiled and ruined it?
Yeah. And Also, for people who enjoy the show, we do have a Patreon if anyone wants to check it out and support. You can go to patreon.com/movies that changed us, where we do weekly commentary tracks, where they're kind of fun hangs, where we watch movies and you sync up your own copy and can listen along with it. And we shoot the shit over it. And
Yeah, it's a really great time.
Yeah.
Okay, so how this movie changed us. I'll start. 1 second. Let me bring my I actually wrote like a little paragraph this time. I'm not going off the cuff just because this movie means a lot of different things and I didn't want my thoughts to be scattered.
Yeah.
So how did It's a Wonderful Life change me? It reminded me that no matter how clear you see your future and know what you want to do, life is not a straight line. However, if you surround yourself with good people and help them in their time of need, then what you get in return will be greater than anything you could have put on your vision board.
Yeah. I like that. I agree. Mine's basically the same thing. I think the fundamental truth, however you want to phrase it, that life is more about what you put into it versus what you get out of it. That George Bailey is a man who puts himself, who puts a lot into other people, like we've been talking about. And so I think that's something that strikes a chord with me that I try to hold myself to.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Good for you. Just fucking a dick about it.
Good for you, Chris.
Good for fucking you, man.
What's your question for me? What do you got?
It's twofold. One is you had seen It's a Wonderful Life before our reaction.
Yes, when I was 13 years old. I don't remember my initial feeling that I got too much when I watched it. I remember thinking it was very heartwarming and sentimental. I remember the ending being like, oh, that's so nice. And we can get into it later, but yeah, now watching it as an adult, it just fucking destroys me.
Was your memory of the movie until we did our reaction just those final 30 minutes?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting to me because after doing the reaction to the movie, I hadn't known anything about the movie. So even the Clarence stuff in the beginning, the angels and all that stuff was such a shock to me. You can see it in our reaction. I'm like, whoa, it's starting this way.
Hello, Joseph. Trouble? Looks like we'll have to send someone.
Whoa, I didn't expect it to get all cosmic.
Yeah.
But afterwards, whenever I talk about It's a Wonderful Life to anyone, or whenever I hear it being talked about on podcasts, they're always talking about those final 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Which I find just fascinating that the first hour and a half is kind of not mentioned.
Yeah, if you look up the premise of the movie on IMDb or any of those sites, they usually specify that it's about a guy who discovers what life would be like without him. When really, yeah, like you said, that doesn't happen until the last act of the movie. The rest of it's kind of just a walkthrough.
I don't know many movies like that where the big reason why people reference it is not even the main actual premise of the movie. The actual premise of the movie is a guy whose dreams are constantly getting shut down and he's fighting through it in a small town that he doesn't feel like he belongs in. That's what the movie is. And slowly he's kind of having a mental breakdown.
Yeah, it's essentially his battle against life in a way, because the truth is, life happens and that's all it is. Anyone who's had bigger dreams or things that they wanted to do or getting out of their town or whatever has had to make some kind of sacrifice. I'm sure anyone can attest to that, right?
Exactly.
And for George, though, his biggest, weakness is that he can't make those sacrifices. He cares about people too much. He loves his family. He loves his community too much.
Yeah, well, that's what I love about the movie so much, amongst many other things, is that what you said, his biggest flaw is that he's too good of a person.
Yeah.
And that's but I think what's interesting is that he's not like Ted Lasso, which is I'm just a good person and I like caring about people. Every time he has to do good, he's like, fuck, I can't let my dad's business die. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, but my brother, he found a nice job and he found a nice... Okay, he can go.
Yeah, and I think
that's it. But that's so real.
Yeah. I think that's what makes him fascinating as a protagonist too, that he's not... we talked about it when we first did the reaction, but he's not this grumpy Scrooge guy. He's a guy who genuinely is trying to do the right thing, like the rest of us. Most people on Earth are trying to do the right thing. And I think it's showing an honest portrayal of doing the right thing doesn't always mean it rewards you. That you're gonna, good people can break. good people can still reach their breaking point. Life can happen.
Yeah.
And I think
Totally.
it makes him like a fascinating protagonist because he is like a good person, but he's just constantly getting beat over the head by just shit happening, which anyone can relate to.
Its themes and the way the story's told feel so modern in that sense. Maybe modern's not the right word, but maybe timeless is a better word.
Sure.
Because even though this movie was a lot about just like war, depression, the Great Depression, all that kind of stuff, but even today, like those themes are so resonant no matter what. That's why it's such a forever movie. It's always going to exist and it's always going to relate to people. There's not that many movies out there that are kind of like that.
Yeah.
So it's very special. But go ahead.
I was going to say, you can also like the stuff you bring up, the bigger, greater world impacts can be shifted forward to today just as easily.
Totally.
With like the pandemic or the housing market crash in the early 2000s or, the World Trade Center. There's like all sorts of big worldly events that can affect our daily lives and kind of shatter what we thought we were going to have happen to us.
Okay. So first question I want to ask you
Yeah.
after that other first question that I asked you.
What do you got for me?
Is there a dream that you had to sacrifice for other people?
I think like, probably like the most recent example. And this is like, it sounds very dramatic to say it's a dream I sacrificed and all that, because it's probably the reaction channel was a big thing. It was affecting not just my personal relationships, which was a very big part of it, which I'd like to get into a little bit later, but it was affecting me as well. And the channel, and we talked about, I don't want to get too into it just because we talked about all that in our farewell video.
I'd like to ask you specifically because I think the question I had was just like, you said, like, what was a dream you sacrificed for someone else, which is what George Bailey does. He sacrifices his own dreams for other people. So I want to ask you, like, how did that come about? You don't have to get into details, but you've talked about like how it was like affecting your personal relationships.
Well, that's what I was going to say. For me, it was more of a broad, kind of all my relationships. It wasn't just one particular person. I mean, some obviously had more significance than others, but it was for you too, as much as it was for my family or my girlfriend, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean? It was affecting kind of just how people perceived me and how I perceived people. And, it made me more of like a shut-in little, what's the word? Not hermit, but, like a little, is it hermit? Is that the word?
I think so.
Okay. I thought hermits move around, but maybe it makes me a hermit. And you get what I'm saying. It made me kind of a shut-in, barely wanted to speak to anyone because I was always just hyper-focused on wanting to do YouTube stuff and whatever. And so, it was nice to, like, once I was on the other side of all the shit we went through, once we got to let it go, it was nice to kind of feel a little more free.
That's interesting because on the flip side of that, because, obviously I'm in the same boat as you. We had that reaction channel together. But the way I can relate to this movie in a way is that we did sacrifice that for other people in our lives, but also for each other.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it didn't feel better. And it still hasn't felt better yet. And I believe and I trust that eventually it will, and eventually I'll be able to zoom out and just be like, I'm glad we did that. But to be transparent, it still sucks. It like sucks that I had to stop that. It sucks that I had to stop the reaction channel. I sometimes will look back at our channel. I'll open up YouTube Studio, switch channels, look back and read the comments, and it didn't feel good, you know. And I think when I was watching this movie recently for this episode, it helped me work through those feelings a little bit. Because, again, every time George Bailey does something, like makes a sacrifice to help someone else, it's not like he immediately is like, well, I did it for the greater good, and now my heart's full.
Yeah.
No, it sucks, and it takes him, like, he goes through years, like, he has kids, and there's that little shot of just, like, and Mary took care of the kids, and George would come home every day from Bailey Building and Bonds or whatever, and it shows him coming home, and he's just miserable, but it's such a tiny moment. That's kind of how it feels, for me at least, and I very much relate to that, of just, like, you're doing the right thing, but it's not, it doesn't feel good. And like, I think it really does take Clarence to come down and show him like, no, these are people in your lives that were affected by you. You can't go away.
Yeah.
And I think this movie, watching it didn't snap me out of those feelings, but it did help me work through it of just like, no. Like I think me making that kind of move is not only just like helping me, but it's helping me and Chris.
Mm-hmm.
We're better friends for it. And
Well, that's the thing, like in terms of like, maybe you don't directly feel like a goodness about it, about like, oh, this is better in the sense of like, oh, this is, like I'm enjoying things now or whatever you want to call it.
yeah.
But if you flip it around, if we were still doing what we were doing before and doing the same pattern, it would have spiraled even worse. And so the fact that we're away from that means we are doing better. You know what I'm saying?
Right. But isn't that interesting? Is that like, I think what this movie deals with is that you can't, we have like as humans a blindness to that though. Like I literally can't see the good in it.
Yeah.
And it sucks. And like George Bailey, he can't see the scene that I've talked to you about off mic is, by the way, whenever I listen to podcasts and when they were like, we were talking off mic, I get this like kind of like rush. I'm like, I wish I was on off mic with them. And now I have a podcast where I can say that.
You fucking dork.
Now
I get to say off mic.
Anyways, off mic, when you and I were just hanging out.
Yeah. I was totally into your train of thought. You totally took me out of it. Altaf had to Altaf it up.
I was talking about a scene that is quietly one of my favorites from this movie, which is like he helps Mr. Martini move out of his rented home that Mr. Potter had given him on lease and move to the like Bailey residency that George helped build with his building bonds like business. And Mr. Martini's a homeowner now, like I said in my synopsis. And it's this joyous celebration of someone asking me, is like, how much are you getting that on rent for? Or whatever. It's like, for rent! George, tell he said it's on rent. I'm a homeowner now. And he's such like this moment of pride. And then Sam Wainwright comes in with his girl. And Sam Wainwright kind of jabs him lovingly, but jabs him at like, oh, he missed out on this great business opportunity. And George jokingly is like, don't throw it in my face. They drive away. And there's this very quiet moment where Mary and George just like walk back to their car and they feel like a genuine couple just like kind of strolling to the car. And George just slams the car door shut with his foot.
Yeah.
That's the feeling I feel a lot of the times where I have friends, I have family, and I have like so much in my life that people would be jealous of, that people crave. It takes one thing to blindside you and you just can't see that.
That's something that I was taught a lot growing up, though, is the importance of not comparing yourself to others. Like, mostly in context when I was a teenager, it was when it comes to like dating and girls and stuff, was like, don't feel pressured to be caught up with what other people are doing, whatever, life is kind of your own thing, And so, and it's pretty timeless because, there's always someone that could be doing better than you, or there's always another, like the goalpost could always shift for yourself.
Yeah.
For me, when it comes to like the little moments of George, like feeling frustrated and those little, like the movie does a good job of sprinkling that in, but not making he's not like whiny at all the whole time. He's just doing the best he can. He gets frustrated.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I really like, though, is that they make him very three-dimensional through that. And obviously, like, the big scene is when he's acting like a complete jackass to Mary.
Yeah, well, we don't have to get to that yet. That's, like, towards, like, the...
But I'm just using it as an example of, like, he's, like, a well-rounded person who also has his own insecurities and resentments and frustrations that he takes out in other ways, too. That he's not a perfect person who's, like, this good... Like you said, he's not a Ted Lasso who just loves people and whatever.
Yeah.
I
love season 1 of Ted Lasso, by the way. Like, season 1 of Ted Lasso was, like, one of my favorite pieces of art in general, like, not even just show.
Yeah.
It just had diminishing returns. I just don't... I've been throwing a lot of shade at Ted Lasso recently, and I just don't... I just want
to be at peace with yourself about it. Like, listen, it served a purpose for me.
But I also wanted to let people know that there was a point where I did really love that show.
Sure.
Anyways, to that point, though, what you were saying of just, like, he doesn't whine... That's kind of what I really like about it, and that's what's very realistic about it, is it isn't that, like, every time something bad happens to him, he, like, becomes a piece of shit to Mary or to his kids or anything. It very realistically shows what life is like. With someone who's well-rounded the way George is.
Yeah.
Which is, like, yeah, man, like, life will throw haymakers at you. And even if you're not happy, you fight through it. Like, that's kind of what George is doing. Like, he slams that door shut. He comes home tired, exhausted, and puts that hat on the rack.
Yeah.
And those are like the tiny ways that kind of resentment builds up if it's not addressed. But that is what life is. Like, you're not every day just being grumpy and sad and whiny. There's moments where you're happy. There's moments where Mary announces she has a kid and he's joyous. Or when he's like introducing Martini to that house, you know? And he's still happy. He's not grumpy the entire time, but it's like, it's all boiling.
Yeah, and he also continues to move forward after those things that frustrate him. Like you said, when he kicks the door shut, he just moves on and continues living. You know what I mean? He doesn't let it stop him from trying.
It's still there.
Yeah.
It's still there, which is the key, though, for me.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so I think this movie does a really good job in also showing like a middle-class family. I wrote it down in my notes. This movie is very much like a middle-class epic.
Yeah.
In a way that I don't think many movies are portrayed that way. I remember Malcolm in the Middle. That's why I related to Malcolm in the Middle so much, because it felt like a family that I grew up in. And I'm not saying any of the characters were like my mom or my dad or my, like, whatever, right? But it was just like the feeling of like, you're not completely poor, but you're not rich either. And you're just like right there. And you're just like, every day is just kind of hand to mouth and you're really just going at it.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's people that are in situations that are worse than you. There's people that are in situations that are better than you. And you're just in a straight line of mediocrity.
Yeah, just coasting along,
You know?
So, like, yeah, in terms of, what does that mean to you, though, in terms of, like, this movie, though?
Well, I like it because it shows what a majority of like people in this country go through, which is like, the 1% is the 1% for a reason. Not everyone has the pleasure of just like having a 6-figure salary. And also, not everyone in America, at least, is dirt poor.
Yeah.
There are obviously people that are going through it much worse than just the middle class, obviously. But there's a majority of Americans that are middle of the road, that are just like, we're not crazy rich, we're not crazy poor, we're kind of just hand to mouth.
We're just skirting along. Yeah.
Right? I kind of like that portrayal because movies are usually extremes. And we never see this kind of life. And I think for me, it means a lot because that's kind of the life I grew up in.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And like they also showed kind of the significance of like a nice, tight-knit community. You know what I mean? How it's like all the recurring characters as he grows up just keep coming back and you feel so attached to Bedford Falls.
Bert and Ernie, Sam Wainwright.
Yeah, Mr. Gowers.
Yeah, Mr. Gower. And like all of them. And then like as he grows up, they get older.
Yeah, I mean, like, Did you have any of that growing up? If you grew up in a similar situation, did you have like recurring people in your lives that kind of came and went? And
the closest thing I have to that, because I don't have like a town that we just knew each other, but I grew up. I was raised Muslim, so every time I went to prayer, like I lived in Knoxville for 11 years. Every time I'd go to prayer, like from the age of 5th grade to when I was 21. I saw the same people every week.
See, that's cool. That's the thing about like, when it comes, because I'm not a religious person, but that is like the appeal though to me that I've always seen.
It's community. Yeah,
exactly. You have that community and you keep going.
To complete my thought really quickly is that I remember seeing like people who were the adults that were my parents' friends in that prayer. And it was a small community because it was Knoxville. So there was not that many people of our specific factor of Islam either. So, right. So it was like a tight knit community. And it was like the adults would be my parents' friends and I was friends with the kids. And then there was like kids younger than me too, that were like babies. And I went back home recently and I saw those babies that have like mustaches and they're taller and they're like, yeah, no, I'm going to med school. By the way, check the channel out, bro. Looking good. And I'm like, you were like a kid.
Yeah, I kind of had the same thing. I went to a wedding a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, some of my really younger cousins were like drunkenly putting their arms around me. So like, what does anyone recognize you from YouTube?
I know. And all like my parents' friends, the adults, right? They were so sweet. They all asked like, how are you doing? You need to come back more. You only come here once a year. Like you need, and they all, and like, and when I see them, I like flash back to my childhood now,
Yeah, that's cool.
So that's the closest thing I have to like a Bedford Falls.
Do you Do you want that at all? Like once you get older and settle down, once we're kind of in our own, whatever, once we're more comfortable financially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think community is super important. I mean, you hear about those blue zones in the world where like people live to be 100. And I remember Yes Theory did a video on like one of the blue zones. They're like, why do people in these zones in the world live so long? And they went to a place, I think in Europe, that was like categorized as a blue zone. Like people live there like 100 plus, and they went to this small town where all the doors were open. People could just come into someone's house and have tea with them. And then like every evening there would be like a kind of gathering where they would have food for the community. And it was all these like really old people, like 80s and 90s even, just like they're retired. And every day they just meet up, chat. In the video they talked about how like when you get older it's hard to maintain friends, and especially when you get to like senior status, a lot of there's a lot of cases where they just like become so lonely, right? And so it's like these blue zones, a lot of the commonality is that there's a tight-knit community. It kind of shows like you mentally stay alive because you have that energy around you.
Your body has a will almost in a way.
Exactly. Like you want to see your buddies. You want to see your people.
Do you think when we get old, we'll still, we'll be hitting each other up at the retirement home?
Yeah. You know what the best case scenario would be is Bill and Ted Face the Music.
Exactly where my head went, is just laying in our deathbeds.
If you guys haven't seen the third Bill and Ted movie, the end credits are like one of the sweetest things ever, which is like they're both crazy old. They're like, all right, Ted, one last ride. And they take the guitars. And they're like,
well, one less reaction. That'll be ours.
Yeah. We put on
Naked Gun 3.
Yeah, exactly. 33 and a third.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
that's cool though, because I feel like that is a big part of the movie, is just the recurring characters,
Oh,
especially the way
Bedford Falls. Yeah.
It's like it's the cliche, Bedford Falls as a character.
It absolutely is.
Totally. And it pays off amazingly at the end, which I know we'll get to later, but
But like in the opening of the movie, what do we see?
It fades in on the Bedford Falls sign.
Yeah. It says, "Welcome to Bedford Falls," right?
Or it says, "You are in Bedford Falls," or something like that. Yeah.
That's right. And then it goes to overhead shots of people's houses.
Yeah.
That you don't even know who these voices are, but slowly through the movie you meet all of them. And they're all praying for George Bailey.
Yeah.
And I think I remember in our reaction immediately, we're just like, oh, wow, they really care about him. They really, yeah, immediately, like, the movie sets it up immediately, like, all these people are looking out for him.
Yeah.
Again, I'm almost getting choked up talking about that.
I know, right? This movie will just fuck you up. This is going to be a therapeutic episode. I should have brought tissues just in case. By the way, I don't know if you're going to get emotional in this episode. You might. I don't know. I might not be, but I like, my body does something different when I'm on camera. If that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Like off mic, when I'm like my body will have like pockets of being emotional. Usually
you've also never cried in front of me.
No, I'm not like, again, I'm not a crier, and that's not personal. You know, like I wish when I'm alone, I like try to make myself cry.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm feeling things, and I'll think like, why the fuck aren't I, like, I feel this and I need to release it. Why aren't I? And so I did this morning though. So I did it.
Well, because you watched a big portion of it last night, and then this morning you watched the final part.
Funny enough, I didn't cry from the movie directly. It was me in my head afterwards, thinking about stuff.
That's kind of how I felt like when we did the Everything Everywhere podcast.
Yeah.
Is that like I cried way more just like thinking about what I wanted to say or the notes or whatever. So it was interesting. But
yeah, 100%.
The next thing I want to talk about is Jimmy Stewart. There's a thing about older movies where you watch them, and even when they're great, you feel like a little bit of distance from them, just because the range of performance is different, right? When Cary Grant is delivering dialogue, that's not how people talk.
Yeah.
Right? And I think another big reason why this movie stands the test of time is Jimmy Stewart's performance feels so modern.
Yeah.
It feels so grounded. That like feels like a guy.
Well, that was his thing too. That was his performance style that he was known for. I think it was like him, and I want to say that Marlon Brando was another really big one that kind of paved the way for that style of acting.
Mm-hmm.
That felt
the naturalistic.
The naturalistic that kind of broke away from, like you said, the theatrical, stagey. Because that's what, like when movies are getting big, they were coming out of stage productions. They're getting stage actors. So they had this like much more, like you said, tightly structured way of delivering dialogue.
Yeah, and like part of Jimmy's like the best special effect in this movie is Jimmy Stewart's voice.
Yeah, and the way he like delivers speeches and kind of stutters a little bit, or he'll bring
that's
in
his magic trick. Like
Yeah.
if Jimmy Stewart starts stuttering, it's gonna be like a banger monologue
because
coming up.
it feels like a
Yeah.
guy just speaking from his heart. He's just saying shit.
I mean, honestly, that's what moves me when he like is when he delays his trip because right after his dad dies to handle business affairs, but he's gonna be about to go to college, right? And he's in that conference room, and then he gives Mr. Potter that like what for? Like he really gives it to him, and he starts stuttering, and it's just like it feels like a guy that's like has a lot of emotions.
Yeah, and that's what happens, right? When you get emotional, you're gonna not speak perfectly clearly. You're gonna.
I'm like that. Like when I'm mad at someone, like when I'm really pissed off at like someone and I'm really trying to give it to them, right? I always mess up. I always stutter.
Yeah.
I don't talk. I don't argue the way Aaron Sorkin writes dialogue. You know what I mean? I wish I could.
Sometimes, like, I can definitely get that way, and then sometimes I can also speak the best when I'm like pissed off.
I think what you usually do is that you'll have like one sentence that just fucking stings. Like you'll have one thing that you says you're like, oh wow, like
Which hopefully you mean stings in a good way, in the sense of like, my point got across, not like I'm trying to hurt you.
that's yeah. Sorry, to be clear, it means that like you got your point across so eloquently through this like one word or one sentence, which is usually the joke we make about each other is like I can ramble a lot, but then you'll have like one point that like
Yeah,
hits.
that applies just in conversations for both of us for sure.
I think like it is great that this movie right away acknowledges his how handsome of a man he is. Like when you're introduced to Jimmy Stewart and you get that movie star entrance, a freeze frame as he's holding his hands apart, to show like how like how big his aspirations are.
Yeah.
And how big his hog is.
Jesus Christ. You said that like I almost didn't notice that for a second.
I know. I was like, what if I could just like drive by this? That would be funny. No, but then like Clarence is like, I like that face.
Yeah.
I really love Jimmy Stewart. It was honestly this movie that pushed me to watch more Jimmy Stewart movies.
Sure.
So if you want to say a small way this movie changed me is that I watched Philadelphia Story after this, where he's even younger and he's like,
that's one I still need to see.
yeah, no, he has a great line of dialogue where he talks about like champagne's a kiss and whiskey's a slap on the back, like something like that, where it's so cool. Smooth. He just feels like anyone could attach themselves to this character, and he makes it. He opens this movie up for anyone.
Yeah, he's like the perfect casting for this character, and like you said, the naturalistic dialogue, the way he performs is so important to this protagonist too, because we all need to feel like we can connect, or like we, to some extent, like at least a little piece of George Bailey, we can all feel like we can relate to.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so I kind of also want to talk about some of the, I don't want to leap to the end too quickly, obviously, but I do think when it comes to like what struck a chord with us so strongly and to so many people was how, after so much buildup of him getting beaten down by life, I did just want to ask you in general, like, is there a time in your life when you feel like something didn't go your way, like a thing you had, a goal you had, or a dream you had, but it turned out to kind of be a blessing?
Oh, that's interesting.
And you can think it in a grand scale or a small scale if you want, but I'm curious if there's anything that we were like, oh, thank God that didn't happen, in a weird way, even if you wanted it to happen.
As people have probably heard us talk about a lot when we, before we did reactions, before we did podcasts, we made short films on the Nice Dude channel. When Nice Dude was not called Nice Dude Movie Night, it was called Nice Dude Productions. And we made a lot of short films. And when I moved to LA, that was my aspirations. I wanted to be a filmmaker. So you and I were very adamant of like, let's make short films every week. Let's try to make that the thing. The short film that I was the most proud of was this short film called Happy Days.
Yeah, let's go. Read young for the young people. Happy Days.
It's private now, but not because I'm ashamed of it. It's just...
I don't think it's private, is it?
Oh, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you go on our Nice Dude channel and look up Happy Days, you can find it. I'm still very proud of it. And you're in it. You're the lead. And we wrote an original song for it. And it was like it was like something that I was like, this is the best thing I've ever made. And again, you might watch it and be like, this is the best thing. But I'm like, you got to consider that I'm like, I hadn't made that many like short films by then, but for me, that was like, this is like the most well-produced thing I've ever made.
And we had it submitted to a film festival too.
Well, that was the thing that I was leading to. It got submitted to, we submitted to film festivals. It got submitted to one. I was going to see my movie on like in a theater and on the big screen in the theater because it got, so we went. You, me, we invited some people. It was a small film festival. We went, we saw it, and it was like this like magical moment. And I was like, oh my God, like this is what I've been dreaming about, and now we'll make more. And that was also the same day where it was March 2020, and it was also the same day where COVID went from this thing that was happening around the world to like, no, go to the grocery store, get everything you can. Things are locking down. And I remember the next day, it was like kind of like apocalyptic in a way because it was raining and we were at Ralph's and we couldn't find anything.
Yeah. COVID hit America like a fucking train.
And I remember like being at home and then you being like, maybe we should watch like Birdemic and make that reaction video, right? Just because we can't make short films. And initially, I remember I was telling you, I was like, oh, but that's like, this is going to be temporary, right? Because we need to like get back to making short films. Because I thought that's like why I moved here. I wanted to be a filmmaker. You know what I mean? You know, like I still want to make stuff in the future. I would love to start making short films again. I would love to start writing again. That's not over for me. But part of me is like, you know, if I continued that path that way, I would have never found the audience that we have now that wrote in emails for this episode. We would have never created like Nice Dude Movie Night. We would have never created this podcast, met people that have guested on this podcast, like TBR Schmidt, Hold Down A,
George from
Cinebinge. You know, we wouldn't have met those people. And so like, I'm like, okay, you know, maybe it'll happen in another way, but I'm kind of glad it didn't happen in the way that I thought it would.
Yeah. I totally understand that too. Cause like, you know, it was weird because for me, it wasn't so easy to make that pivot either, but I'm quicker to kind of jump on the numbers and the response and be like, okay, well, bottom line is people don't care about our short films. So let's just do something that people like, you know? And I still do come into conflict with it in my head sometimes. I still like making stuff too. You know, I enjoy writing. I enjoy being creative. And I think sometimes I get my creativity out of my system through YouTube in different ways. Yeah. Even if it's not exactly how we might have pictured it at first, but I still feel good and I feel like myself doing it.
Yeah, you know, I met you when you were still like interested in screenwriting in some sort. I do think that you are not interested in that aspect of writing anymore.
Not the same. Yeah.
Right. So I kind of still am, even though I don't like kind of push myself to write anymore. I still have that kind of dream. Mm-hmm. But yeah, but it just hasn't happened the way I thought it would.
Yeah.
Which is like when I dreamed about moving to LA, I thought it was going to be like, I'll make a bunch of short films, start submitting them to film festivals, it gets screened. And then eventually I'll make, once one of them gets screened, I'll start networking and then make a bigger one. And then I'll write something I'll be able to sell it, you know, and none of that happened. Yeah. And I think like, I remember Casey Neistat in a video, he said that like my whole career was just a bunch of branches that I just was like, all right, let me swing on to this one. And then
that's interesting. Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, this didn't go the direction I had to go. I started as like a guy who made advertisements. And now I'm daily vlogging. Okay. Now let me swing on to this branch. And like, you just like, that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, I mean, like,
this movie is literally like, that's what's happening to George, but George still is holding on to that dream of like what he had when he was like a younger person, and can't see that life has changed. And like, you gotta like kind of, life has changed for the better is what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, like, I definitely connect with what you said too, where if we had gone that way, we wouldn't have the audience that we built too, because at the end of the day, I believe Nice Dude Movie Night and, you know, Movies That Changed Us, my favorite part of it is the audience, you know? Like, even when he did reactions, my favorite part was never really meant to be like, look at me, look at us, this, you know, we're so funny and cool, which, I mean, I like being funny with you. I like shooting the shit with you on camera, but my favorite part is how many people like to share the trivia of movies in the comments, and when people feel like we're all kind of coming together and appreciating it, you know? And I think that's something I didn't expect, you know, to feel going down this path creatively, you know?
Yeah, I think it's cliche to say this, but you and I still sometimes can't believe that there's people that are just like waiting for the next video or the next episode of this podcast even. But like even when we were doing reactions, there were people like that were just like, oh my God, I rewatched a bunch of your previous ones. Okay, finally you uploaded a new one. You know?
Yeah. Do you ever have difficulty seeing how like you might impact others at all?
Oh yeah.
Or is that like a focus of attention for you in any way?
100%. I'm more concerned about everyone being disappointed in me than ever thinking about people being impacted by me in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I constantly think that, like, everyone around me is disappointed.
Yeah.
It's something that I'm trying to work on, like we all are in various aspects. But yeah, those are my feelings.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of reciprocate that. You know, I constantly feel like I'm fucking up. And I mean, we talked about this in our Everything Everywhere podcast, when I'm feeling low, I tend to kind of shut myself off. You know, I get very overwhelmed with shame and guilt. And
it's so funny to me that you say that, because you said that in the Everything Everywhere podcast, but I don't know why it's hitting me in a different way right now, because I don't think of you like that.
Yeah.
I think of you as someone that is very confident about himself, and as someone that is just like, is not concerned about, like, I don't think of you as someone who's insecure about what people think of him. I always think of myself as that way. So I never like thought about you feeling those
it's
kind
not
of
even,
things.
it's more like I'm disappointed in myself. You know, it's more like what I think of me, if that makes any sense. You know, and also just to be clear too, like any listeners who might have the same type of behavior, I don't want to normalize that, you know, and make people think like, oh, it's okay to just isolate yourself when you're feeling sad.
I don't think you're saying.
Yeah,
that.
I just like to make it clear that it's something I'm working on for sure, and I don't want to behave that way. You know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. I mean, like, I think what snapped me out of it pretty quickly was, I think in like October or something, that I had family both separately tell me like a lot, you know, to make it clear that they care about me. It's kind of weird to talk about now, but like, you know, I had a family member literally jokingly say like, if you ghost me like that again, I will show up to your house unannounced. You know, there's certain things that do kind of put into perspective that people actually give a shit. You know, when you're dealing with your own head and dealing with your own, you know, whatever pain in some sort of way.
Yeah.
And so, I was just curious to, you know, hear if is there anything for you that snaps you out of it? Because I think we all have our thing that snaps us out of it, you know.
I think it's when I actually talk to people, you know, if that makes sense. Like a lot of the worst conversations I have with my friends and family are in my head.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. I think sometimes when you put it out in the universe, whatever you're feeling or going through, you realize that, you know, oh, it's actually not that bad, you know?
Yeah. Someone who I'm very inspired by is Dax Shepard and what he's done with Armchair Expert. And a lot of the times you'll have someone really famous on. Like I remember he had Tarantino on. No, not even Tarantino. He had like this actor on. I forget who he was. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. But like, I remember he said, okay, I just want to make it super clear to you that I was always insecure about the fact that you even liked me at all. I thought you always hated me. I really love that Dax just on a podcast that has so many people listening in to someone that is really famous, just straight up saying that to be like, I thought you hated me. I was always insecure about that. And I now realize that's all in my head. And I was very inspired by that just because like it made me realize that if I open up to people about that kind of stuff, that people I trust, obviously, then maybe they'll make me realize that not everyone is disappointed in me, or not everyone hates me, or not everyone wants to be away from me.
Yeah.
You know, like if I just talk to them.
Yeah. I think like, or sometimes it just takes, like just the right sentence.
Because we're never going to have Clarence to show us exactly what these people are missing out on.
We got to find our own Clarences. You know?
Within ourselves in a way, right?
I think any listeners, by the way, what snaps you out of it? You know, I'm curious.
Hashtag snap you out of it.
I think the best way, you know what it is? I do want to hear this from listeners. The genuine question, anyone on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you can comment, what movie snaps you out of it? Because I think we've all had movies that make us feel good immediately. Like, please drop bombs. It could be this movie. I don't care. You know, I'm good. I'm down for whatever.
I really like that question. Yeah, on Spotify you can comment now. I forget about that.
Yeah, it's a new little feature. So,
I like that actually. But anyways,
Yeah, I may or may not end up cutting this out, but I think I told you this in person already or
Okay.
off mic. When I was in October, when I was pretty depressed and avoidant, my dad is blowing up my phone, trying to make sure that I was fine. And, he ended up sending me when I finally did respond to him and tell him, I was like, I'm sorry, I've been doing this. I haven't been responsive. And he ended up sending a long text clarifying to me that listen, I don't want to hear from you about how good your life is and how you're getting everything you ever wanted and how well everything's going perfect. No, I want to be there because life is fucking hard. You know what I mean? And so, that always spoke to me very deeply, because he does put into perspective very quickly, and so, I think it just meant a lot to me.
Yeah, hearing that means so much too. Getting to hear that someone wants to hear from you at your worst.
Yeah.
That's really that's true love, Yeah, because it's so true. I have that feeling with my parents too. I sometimes am scared to call them when my life is going bad. But when my life's going good, okay, now I can call them. It'll
Exactly.
be great. And then you realize, no, they're your parents.
Yeah.
Or they're people that are the people that really love you don't care. They just want to hear from you and make sure, and they also want to be there for you.
Yeah, and they want to be needed,
Yeah, but we all do, right?
Yeah.
We all want to be needed in some way.
Oh, yeah, like at university with friends, you want to reach out an arm to someone who needs it.
Okay, so while we're in this headspace, you want to talk about the final 30 minutes of this movie?
Fuck yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so Uncle Billy loses $8,000 because he's kind of giving it to Mr. Potter with this headline about Harry, and then he accidentally slips the envelope full of $8,000 in that newspaper. Mr. Potter sees it and is like, okay, well, this is great, right?
Yeah.
And it's Christmas time, so this is when the movie becomes officially a Christmas movie. It's Christmas time, so George Bailey's kind of happy. His brother's coming back, being commemorated as a hero, right?
Yeah.
Saving all those people. And Uncle Billy comes back as a nervous wreck. Papers fucking everywhere. And now the fucking raven that's been showing up the entire movie,
It's just on his arm.
shoulders, yeah, dude, you're dying. Basically.
Yeah. There's a squirrel too that appears.
The squirrel comes and hugs him, which is what I love. The raven's kind of this ominous thing in the entire movie.
Yeah, it could be implied, is that the devil's influence or something like
Right.
that?
And then when Uncle Billy's at his work, it's on his shoulder while he's talking to Harry.
Yeah.
And then so George Bailey finds out and he gets very violent. He's like, we gotta find that money, you old jerk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And starts having a breakdown. He goes to Mr. Potter. Mr. Potter is eating it up, basically.
Yeah. He just basically mocks him. And then obviously with the life insurance, because he basically asks him, what collateral do you have if I'm going to give you a loan?
Your life isn't even worth.
Yeah, exactly. You're worth more dead than alive, is what he tells him.
Right.
And he's like, I'm not going to call the authorities too, because all the journalists. He's basically just trying to destroy his life.
And I skipped a scene in between where he goes home first.
Oh yeah, that was before. Huh?
Right. So
Okay.
he goes home and you get this unbelievable image of him going home to the sweetest family. Mary, the most beautiful woman ever, is setting up a Merry Christmas sign. The tree looks great. The daughter's playing piano, practicing for tomorrow. The son's in a mask. And there's this great shot of him sitting down with all this party confetti on his head and he's moving it.
Yeah, I know. That scene probably is the hardest for me to get through watching it.
Why?
I think just seeing, like you said, it's such an uncomfortable, it feels almost very modern in a way. The way the daughter's playing the piano in the background too, it creates this weird, what's the word? Contrasting energy.
Yeah, it makes the scene feel more tense. It's whenever someone nowadays, whenever there's a conversation or whenever there's a scene that's supposed to be suspenseful, they added a tea kettle going in the back.
Yeah, and it's just devastating watching this man just treat his
Lose
family
it.
like that, losing it. Yeah, exactly. And
He says why are we even in this house? It's getting all drafty because Zuzu's sick.
Yeah.
And then he he tells her, we shouldn't, why did we have all these kids?
Yeah.
He starts really saying horrible shit.
Yeah. Well, and I think what makes it hard to watch is how real it is.
Uh-huh.
That, like I touched on earlier, that good people can snap. Good people can break. Life happens to anyone.
And this is a guy that's been so great to the community, picks up that phone, starts yelling at Zuzu's teacher. and like saying horrible shit to her.
Yeah.
And what I like about it though is that there's still like layers, right? He's still like, he's immediately sorry, realizes what he's done,
Yeah.
still can't get out of it. And then, but when he visits Zuzu, he still loves his daughter. Like, it's like, that's like the duality of life. Like you could feel like your life is falling apart, but then there's still parts of your life that you want to love. Like, I really enjoy that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Goes to the bar, and there's this shot that is one of my favorite shots in the movie, which is just like, it's all performance. But it's like a close up on Jimmy Stewart sitting in the bar, basically shaking and being like, fucking like, help me.
He prays. Yeah.
But but whether you pray or not, we've all had that moment where everything's gone to a boiling point in your life personally. And you're just like sitting there, whether it's at a bar or whether you're at home, just being like, I am lost.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no idea what to do. And that's what I mean by it feels very Jimmy Stewart's performance feels very modern. Like in 1947 to have that moment is pretty intense.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's so real.
It's so human. Yeah. Yeah, like you said, we've all had that boiling point where you're just like, make this stop. How do I make this stop? You know?
He goes to the bridge.
And he's ready to...
Again, 1947 to do this, very bold.
Yeah.
Very bold if they did it today.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a pretty shocking thing to see it come down to that. I mean, we knew it was, something like that was coming up because of the opening, but it felt still like almost like you wanted it to be over for him.
Yeah.
In a good way. I mean, like you wanted his suffering to be over, his life to get better.
Yeah, and then like he sees this old man looking at him.
I remember because I had already seen it when we did the reaction.
And
when
you
I was
especially knew that part.
Yeah, exactly. That was the main thing I remembered taking out of it. But I remember I watched it again recently through imagining it was through your eyes, having never seen it, and seeing him kind of just stand there on the side. I remember, I think you said it out loud in the reaction. Who the fuck is that guy?
Oh, who's that? Wait, who's that old man? And then he jumps, and then if you watch a reaction, you can literally see me realize it's Clarence.
Yeah.
And I freak out.
Oh, Tom Sawyer's dying out too.
Oh shit, it's Clarence! Fuck! And then Clarence kind of just takes him through Bedford Falls.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he starts off basically explaining to him that he's an angel, and Jimmy Stewart ends up wishing he was never born. Essentially, because he's like, you know what, everyone will be a whole lot better off if I wasn't even around, And so basically Clarence is like, okay, bet. Yeah, let's do it, dude. And he walks him through the city, and basically one by one we get to see, obviously, how everyone is worse off without him. And we get to kind of really understand the profound impact that he has on other people. Even down to like his brother would just be straight up fucking dead, which in a weird way also has a ripple effect because he saved several soldiers too at one point. So those soldiers are gone now.
Right. And it becomes kind of like a weird horror movie. Like the genre switch in this movie is pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, the most ridiculous one is obviously people make fun of the fact that Mary's just this old maid.
Yes. I know we cut that out of the reaction. It wasn't because it was like, we thought that was offensive, we cut it out. I think we just didn't have much of a thing to say in it.
And it's just very funny to just watch it. Yeah, watch and be like,
oh no, she's single and works at a library.
But also the fact that she's single.
Yeah. Okay.
And no, but if she was single and happy, that's another thing. But the fact that she's single and she lives a sad life as a librarian.
Yeah.
Anyways, one part of this very perfect movie.
Yeah, he basically ends up, freaking out and asking. Now he just wants to go back to his kids more than anything. Now he just learns to love and appreciate everything that he has.
The reveal shot of the snow coming down is so satisfying. And then he sees Bert and he's like, you know me? And then this is where Jimmy Stewart really fucking shines so hard. I mean, he's been shining this entire movie, but this is his performance is what's carrying these final minutes, right? And then it's Zuzu's pedals, all of that. He comes home, and I think the key in this is before the fucking gut punch that's about to happen with Uncle Billy with the money.
Yeah.
Before all of that, I think the key is that like he sees his family again. He greets that broken nook with such glee. He's like, "Oh my god!" and he kisses it. And then he's like, "Isn't it wonderful? I'm going to jail."
Yeah. And even running through the city, he's like yelling "Merry Christmas" to all the buildings.
Oh, we skipped that. It's like, "Merry Christmas, you old building alone."
Yeah.
Like, and then I mean, also the moment that I really like freaked out in the reaction is like, "Merry Christmas, Mr. Potter." Now, I think you've pointed this out many times to me, and also we've talked about it, is the fact that like before the town comes in the house, his life is very much the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's still fucked because that money's gone. He's gonna go to jail, probably, right? And nothing has really changed, but like he himself has gotten this perspective of how many people really love him and how he's impacted people. And like the big life that he wanted, he actually got.
Yeah.
And that, like, so that I think the key, the emotion, the fact that like he settled just on that is so important. So when I was watching this movie initially, I was like, well, that's great. So like, even though his life is not like changed that much, even though he's still fucked with all this money, now he has perspective. And I was happy with that too. And so this is what I call like a fucking cherry on the cake, right?
Icing on the cake, you mean?
Icing on the cake.
Cherry goes on ice cream.
Sorry, icing on the cake. So
Altaf doesn't know desserts, by the way.
I'm so oblivious.
He's dairy free, so when it comes to ice cream and cake,
I became dairy free 2 years ago, so now I lost my
he
memory.
just completely lost
like
all
Men in
connection.
Black, like it just disappears now. Yeah. So again, I would highly encourage, if you haven't seen our reaction, to check it out, because I do think I'm really proud of how this turned out, because it's so raw. In a way, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I was this raw. But I'm wearing this outfit too in it.
I think we're both wearing the same outfits that we wore when we reacted to. We didn't do that on purpose.
Hell yeah. Uncle Billy comes in, and we're like, whoa, what's happening?
Tears in his eyes.
Tears in his eyes.
Mary's setting it up, saying, "Oh, it's a miracle. You need to see this." You know.
He says the whole town got together, and like Uncle Billy drops the money, and everyone pitched in a little when they heard George was in trouble.
Oh yeah, and no questions asked. Everyone was just more than down to help him. Because basically George lived his whole life just doing nothing but giving to other people, and he never asked for anything in return.
And so all these people we've seen throughout the 2-hour course of this movie come in, and we see them pitch in and help. Wow, it's really hard to talk about this. It's still, it fucking is crazy.
It hits, man.
And I think there's like one of my favorites is like a martini coming in. It's like, I broke the jukebox.
I busted the jukebox.
Like, fuck yeah. What a fucking knockout ending.
I know, it's probably one of the best endings to a movie of all time. Like, that's not even me being podcasty. That's like, I think I'm just telling an objective truth here.
Because you really got to earn that kind of ending.
Yeah.
You have to. Like, it's so corny if you don't have the hour and a half beforehand.
The substance that leads up to it.
Right? To like have this joyous and unapologetically happy ending.
Well, not to go jump all over the place, but the opening sets it up very clearly what the heart of this movie is, when the angels, or the heavenly people are talking to each other, how they say George Bailey needs help, and Clarence is like, why, is he sick? And he's like, no, worse, he's discouraged.
I know,
he's discouraged.
It's from the beginning.
Yeah,
that line is so good. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, I remember it moved us too when he did the reaction as well.
Is he sick?
No, worse. He's discouraged.
That's a feel.
I remember when he said that, we were both like, oh.
I know, like, so quickly.
Immediately we were like, okay, this movie has us.
This movie's very sharply written too.
Well, what's so genius about, just to jump in on the writing of that, is it makes you lean a little closer now when you walk through George Bailey's life. Because it adds like a new context where you're walking through, you're wondering what went wrong.
There's a lot of questions set up, like why are they all praying for him?
Exactly.
So immediately you know something horrible goes on. And then, the discouraged line. You're like, okay, what happened here?
Yeah, I think what makes it hit so hard, I think for a lot of people, and because obviously like that's the significant. Everyone's like, oh, the ending. Everyone talks about it. Is like, I think we often feel, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but we often feel like, we're lacking in some level of like love or some type of like, whether it's from life or whatever it is. And so it's easy to find those situations where you realize the love that was like right there for you. You know?
Yeah, it's almost like Pavlovian the way people cry when Uncle Billy comes in with the money. Like I
Yeah.
remember watching a bunch of movie reactions, and almost like every person, when the money, like when he drops the money and they say that everyone pitched in, like everyone bursts into tears.
Everyone immediately.
Like
Yeah.
it's like a scientific experiment. Like it's so like, I'm not trying to reduce this movie to that, but it's like, it's crazy, right?
Oh yeah, I hear your reaction immediately. Went, oh my god! Like, and I
like,
just hear that in
squeal.
my voice. Yeah.
The only other time I did that was Gladiator.
Oh yeah, that was a big one too.
That was the only other time I cried that hard.
Yeah. Which, I mean, those are two solid movies to cry on camera too.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I was like, fuck, oh my god, because I just I think kind of like you, like I've gotten teary on camera. I'm an emotional person. I've cried in front of you many times too, off camera. But I think like on camera, I still don't let myself get that raw and open.
Oh yeah. I mean, like that's instinctive, right?
Because there's lights on me. Like as much as we're trying to be genuine and raw, there's a mic, there's lights, there's cameras. Like,
yeah, you're naturally going to be in like performance mode. It's hard to really get there where you're like real.
So in the moment, I was shocked at myself. I was like, oh, where's this coming from? Like, oh my, like, oh, it's just tears streamed down my face immediately. And I remember the like little post discussion that we had after the reaction. I could barely get through it. I was like, you fucking talk about it. I can't.
Yeah.
So
But you summarized it really well, though. I remember. I do actually like watching the ending to that reaction. Funny enough, like
what
whenever
did I say?
want to, you basically said that
When you're in your early 20s, you have so many dreams that you want to fulfill. And when you don't fulfill them, gee, fuck! Shit, man, I hate it. When you don't fulfill them, it becomes burdensome. I'm like, well, did I waste my life?
Yeah.
And that kind of blinds you to, like, the beautiful things that you have in front of you. Which is, like, people genuinely care about you. Fuck.
That's literally kind of that's what you said.
holy shit.
Yeah. So
like mid tears, I just fucking popped that one out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know you want to say like, oh, I was a mess, but like you kind of hit it home.
Sometimes I got bangers.
Sometimes you got bangers.
I knew then. I was like, we should start a podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, do you want to do some?
Let's do some write-ins. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we asked you guys how It's a Wonderful Life changed you. You emailed us. We're gonna read some of those right now. Okay. So first one comes in from Noah Hallman,
Longtime fan of ours,
and a very loyal Letterbox follower of me.
Oh yeah, I forget that. Yeah.
He follows my Letterbox, likes all my. I just appreciate you, man.
And thanks for writing in, Noah. We
Also,
see you.
as with many movies, I saw this movie for the first time in my 8th grade film study after school club. We then watched it in another class the following week. But I didn't care that I'd just seen it, because I really liked the movie and it felt special. Fast forward to a little over a year ago, and I was easily in the worst place I've ever been. Lost a job I loved more than anything. That also housed me. Had to move back in with my parents, dropped out of grad school, couldn't find a job, student loans were piling up. I'd hit my George Bailey moment. But your reaction video became one of my comfort watches during those tough times, because not only was the reaction amazing and genuine, but the edit of the movie you made perfectly covered everything I needed from that movie in a shorter span of time than watching the full movie. And I wasn't watching it alone, but with both of you. Didn't matter if it wasn't Christmas, that movie and video was a lifesaver for me during that time. Jimmy Stewart, every time I watch him, I remember he's one of my favorites of all time, and as always, he kills it in this movie. Now, it's one of those few movies that always make me feel emotional, and as someone who doesn't really get super emotional like that often, and both of you are now forever a part of that movie for me, so I just wanted to personally say thank you to the both of you. Thanks, Noah, and then he wrote, aka PB Zeppelin 42. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, that's what I was saying earlier, like, reading these write-ins and hearing people talk about how much, like, that our reaction video meant to them, because obviously it's because of this movie.
Yeah.
This movie means a lot to people. This movie was emotional. That's why our reaction was good. But I kind of get it. I kind of get this, like, seeing us get emotional and be that raw and genuine. It makes you feel less alone, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's what people like about reaction videos in general, I think, is like there's a vicarious nature to it where people feel like they're watching a movie with friends.
Do you want to read the next one?
Yeah, I got the next one. This one's from Max. I just want to take a moment to say that you guys reacting to It's a Wonderful Life inspired a change in me. I am an old man. I try to stay positive, but cynicism creeps in like joint pain in cold weather. Seeing a couple young men have such a positive and wholesome reaction to a movie that could be easily dismissed as too sentimental really warmed my heart. I'll occasionally rewatch a reaction when I need a moral pick-me-up. Thanks, Max.
Thank you, Max.
Yeah, thank you for watching.
So I think that's something I'm really proud of our reactions, and also this podcast is I have kind of an allergy to this modern day meta-ness that happens, which is like always rejecting sentimentality.
Being like overly self-aware to a flaw.
Yeah. And I feel like that's why with like the reaction channel and now this podcast, my goal, and I know your goal too, is always to come at stuff very sincerely.
Yeah.
And I'm glad like our reaction video for It's a Wonderful Life that came across, you know?
Yeah, I know. It is kind of crazy to think about. And you know, like we said at the top that it's not our most viewed reaction by any means. It's like a pretty mid-tier episode, you know, or whatever. But it did hit people a lot. You know, the people that did watch it seemed to be really moved by it.
Yeah, it means something.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
All right, I'll read the last one that we have from Scott. Hi, I'm from Perth, Australia. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And my cousin, who was like a little sister growing up, moved to the US 10 years ago. Being a big movie fan, I'd always wanted to go to America anyway, but obviously I had to now. Unfortunately, undiagnosed ADHD and depression got in the way for 9 years. But when I was diagnosed, my psyche asked, what's something you've always wanted to do? And through ugly crying, the first thing I knew was I wanted to spend Christmas in New York with my cousin. That's how I found myself in New York, watching It's a Wonderful Life and happy crying on Christmas Day 2024.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, man. I'm glad you got to do it.
Yeah, I know. That is really cool.
Yeah, and
You
it's
know,
also such an interesting thing to be like, what do you want to do? And
Yeah.
then he just did it.
I know. Well, I was going to say, I'm sure 9 years of buildup, it must have taken a lot of courage to do that. So
Yeah, good
That's
for
awesome.
you.
Yeah,
No,
hell
really
yeah.
good for you. So thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to our patrons for supporting us again and again. Last but not least, stay nice, dudes.